All right, welcome to the next day of the daily drawing. Today we're going to be drawing a cat, so I figured that'd go right after the dog would be a pretty nice touch. I really liked this pose of the cat because I think it'd be really fun to add kind of like your own thing that the cat was reaching for, so that you can add a lot of creativity to. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at it. So I noticed that the body is a lot longer than what the dog body was that we drew previously. It does still have the torso up here where the rib cage is, but I noticed that the hips are actually, seems like they're either the equivalent, like the same size as the rib cage, if not then maybe a little bit bigger even. I think part of that comes from cats have to be able to jump really, really high, so mostly to kind of either hunt or escape from predators. So that might be why their back legs are a little bit more muscly and built than the standard regular dog would be. All right, we notice that the head is very round, got little curvy pointy ears, very thin slender legs, although notice that their thighs are extremely bulky. That's where most of that power from the jump comes from, is from that back thigh. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so I did notice that I did have one more blank page in here, which it was a little bit drawn on by, I think, one of my nieces or nephews, but that's okay. This one over here is fine. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the body as usual. I noticed that it kind of has it's still kind of that bean shape, but it's a little bit of a longer bean rather than a thicker bean. And of course, if you want a slightly chubbier cat, feel free to make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to just go ahead and start with my rib cage as a little circly shape. And then I'm going to go down however long I want the body to be. And then I'm going to draw one about the same size that's kind of cattywampus or across from it. After I have my rib cage and I have my hips, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect it. Now, if I look at here, here's the back of the rib cage here. It kind of actually connects with a frown line instead of a smile. And then this one right here would be, and this one right here would be kind of more of a smile. So coming from the back of the rib cage area, about a little less than halfway down, I'm going to switch it into a frown and connect it to the back of the body. So it's almost kind of like it's shooting out of the center of that rib cage area. And then we're going to do just a simple curve, connecting the bottom of the body to the other side, like this. So this is just a simple smile, this is a simple frown, connecting those together. Make sure this isn't too pointy right there. If it is a little too pointy, feel free to erase it and make it slightly curved so that it doesn't look like you have like a boxy cat, unless that's the look you're going for. All right, now, in this particular pose, the cat's kind of looking upwards in this direction, so it still has a very round head, but its muzzle is a little bit tilted upwards, and we see a little less of this eye and a little more of this eye. So to draw that, if I'm looking at it, it kind of almost somewhat overlaps the body because the head's kind of scrunched backwards, so the neck isn't as visible. So I'm going to slightly overlap that just a bit, and if you want to go for a younger cat, feel free to draw a bigger head. If you want to go for kind of an older cat, younger cat, bigger head, older cat, smaller head. Not super, super small though, of course. All right, so I like the angle this is making, so I think I'm going to keep it here. So it's just right above that rib cage area. All right, so now that I have my ribs, hips, body, and I have my head, now before I draw the muzzle, I'm going to go ahead and draw my neck. Here we can see this is the back of the cranium. The neck is just a gentle curve going down. Now, even though this neck is being overlapped by this arm, I'm still going to go ahead and draw it. I can kind of tell by following this that where that neck goes, and it just kind of curves with the body to the head. So I'm just going to connect this with a small parenthesis. So this parenthesis is kind of curving in this direction to connect this, and then I'm going to curve in the opposite direction to connect it on this side, just to kind of have like a little bit of a void there, so that's not like a really, really round head on like no neck body, which would be weird. Okay, so now that I have my head, I'm going to go ahead and draw my muzzle. Now, cats have very distinct muzzle shapes. They have 3 different shapes to their muzzles. What do you call? I don't even know. The top of the muzzle has very separated segments, and then the bottom part for their lower jaw, it's a lot bigger. So what I would do first is I'm going to start with a simple circle that's slightly off to one side because it is a 3/4 turn and it's also looking up. So just kind of a circly shape. And then after I have my circly shape, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first draw the nose. It helps if you draw the nose first because then you can kind of plot where you're going to put the rest of the muzzle. So the nose in this one is slightly to the side and close to the top. I'm just going to draw a simple triangle for the nose. You can add more detail if you want to, but I'm going to keep with kind of a cartoony aesthetic at first. All right, now this is where it gets a little bit tricky because I want to have a separate piece here, here and down here, but I want to make sure that it does not look like a dog muzzle, because that's really easy to do whenever you're trying to draw it. So something that I notice is that it drops down straight from the nose first, and then we get kind of almost a V shape, but it has a little bit of a wonk right here. It's especially important to draw that wonk because that helps defines where this part of the muzzle is. So I'm going to drop it down first with a small little line, and I'm just going to curve this off to the side in kind of a smile. And then what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to kind of smile it, but then I'm going to exaggerate that smile until it touches the outside of my circle-y shape right here. After I do that, I would want to kind of fill it in just a little bit down here to kind of make it have a small black triangle in the center of its mouthpiece. And then before I move on, I want to actually define the bottom jaw, which is just where I'm going to outline that bottom round part. Now notice that I'm touching the lip here, but I'm not going to touch it here. I want to leave a small gap, and that just kind of helps show that it is a turned position, which is really helpful when drawing a cat. Alright, so now that I got my short round muzzle, what I want to do next is I want to go ahead and draw the eyes. So the eyes are actually, let's draw the ears first, because the ears are going to have to help us line up the eyes. So if I go across from the nose, I see that across from the nose is where my ear is. So if I go across like this, that's where it's going to start. Now that's not always going to be the case, depending on the angle that you're drawing it at. Sometimes it'll be higher or lower. All right, so I notice that the ear kind of goes straight, and then it frowns, and then there's a slight diagonal line. So I'm just going to go straight up, however tall I want my ears. And then I'm just going to frown, and then turn that frown into a diagonal line. And if you want to draw slightly longer ears or slightly shorter ears, that's entirely up to you. And then I have kind of the same technique here, except this is going to be slightly more diagonal line, frown, and then back to a diagonal line, starting right across from that nose. And if you'll notice that I did put those marker dots as I was drawing to help me figure out where I want to start my ear. You don't have to keep those as you go, but I just like to do that just so that I know that I'm measuring it correctly. All right, so now I have my ears. Now I can do my eyes. So if you'll notice, the eyes are actually almost kind of like right next to the nose, and then it's actually going to be on that line that I have here between my nose and my lower ear. And cat's eyes are very distinct. They're not perfectly round. They're going to have I guess it's just called a cat eye. It drops down a little bit, and then it makes a frown. So all it is a slight diagonal line, frown, and then you have a sharper smile. So dogs' eyes are a little bit more rounded, where you do kind of like a wider smile like this. Cats are going to be a little bit more of a frowny line, and then you would have, of course, the pupil on the inside. Sometimes they're kind of slitted, sometimes they're kind of just round. It depends on the expression of the cat, but that's kind of the shape that you're going to go for. So here I see that this is where my nose is at. I'm going to go across from the corner of the nose, which, by the way, this actually kind of lightly connects to the nose. And that's how you get that kind of look to the cat for a cat eye. So it's not a perfect connection. It's more of a color fur thing that you can kind of see. So make sure it's not like a really thick, bold line. You want to keep it kind of soft and subtle, and maybe leave a little bit of a gap. So I notice that there's a darker fur line right here that is connecting it. I'm going to scoot it over just a tiny bit. As soon as you get to the edge of the muzzle, that's where you're going to start the eye. So I'm going to draw a slight diagonal line first, and then I'm going to change it into a frown, like this. And then I'm going to change that frown into a smile right here. But it is very important that you have that little kind of longer piece to the eye down here, because that's a very cat-like thing. And then you can go ahead and draw the eyes. I'm just going to fill it in and leave a little highlight, just because it is such a small drawing for here. All right, the other side is very similar. However, my muzzle is blocking part of my eye. So I do want to keep this part of the muzzle. I don't have to keep this part up here because it's kind of facing towards me, but I'm going to go ahead and draw this part a little darker so that I know that I'm going to keep it. And then because it's so turned, it's actually going to be physically connected to the nose for the eye. I'm just going to go up, frown it, and then do a slight smile. So I don't really see this drop down because it's overlapped by the muzzle and the nose. But after I finish drawing my eye shape, which is just a frown and a smile, I'm going to go and fill it in and leave a little white highlight. If you're drawing this pretty big, you probably have enough space that you could add like an iris and pupil and all that. But because mine's so small, I'm just going to keep it small. All right, so this is already starting to look very cat-like in the head, which is great. I can go ahead and keep this right here, which I am going to overlap that a little bit with the paw, so I'm not going to worry about darkening it too much. I like the forehead is good. You can add whiskers at this point if you want. Usually I save whiskers for last, but just because it's kind of fun to draw whiskers, I'm going to go ahead and draw them now. All they are is just frowny lines that you're going off the page with. And they do have some whiskers above their ears, but since I'm going for a cartoony aesthetic first, I'm not going to draw those. All right, before we move away from the head, I would suggest go ahead and draw a parallel line on the inside of the ear to help show where the interior of the ear is. So all I'm doing is I'm just following the line that I drew for the ear, kind of like drawing almost a second ear on the inside. All right, so now we have a really cute cat head that we are ready to move on to the body. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this leg right here, and I love its pose. It's kind of like turning upwards, which is really cute. So let's look at the anatomy first. This bump right here is the back of the shoulder, so we already have that curve right here, so we don't have to worry about redrawing that. But we do need to draw kind of the circly shape that makes up the rest of the shoulder. So I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to draw a little bit of a circly shape here, and because the leg is lifted up, that's why the shoulder is tilting in this direction and not tilting down like it normally would be if we were drawing a standing or sitting cat. All right, after we get the shoulder drawn, that's this part right here, then we're going to have the elbow, the wrist, and then we have the paw kind of curving down. So I'm going to start at the bottom of the shoulder. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to first kind of draw a flat line. And you can make this more of a frown if you want to add a little bit more of a curve to it. But it's going to be on the bottom of the shoulder. And then before you get to the edge of the inside of the body, about maybe halfway between the bottom of the shoulder and the outside of the body, I'm then going to make it have a curve going up. So this is going to be this part right here. It's kind of a parenthesis going up until it gets across from maybe the chin area without touching it, of course. So to let me demonstrate that, I'm starting here. I want to curve it up until it gets right about here across from the chin. So if it helps, put marker dots and then just connect those marker dots with a slight parenthesis shape like this. All right, so this is the bottom of the arm, by the way. The top of the arm is going to overlap my face slightly, so I'm not worried about that right now. I'm just focusing on the bottom part. All right, after you get to the wrist, then we just have a slight frown for the paw. So here's my wrist, and then I'm just going to turn that line into a frown shape going up in the direction that I want my paw to go. After I have achieved my paw, then all I'm going to do is to draw the paw shape. I'm just going to do similar to what we did with the dog, is just parentheses. So all you have to do is at the edge of the paw, you're just going to draw a parenthesis like this. And once again, just because the paw is turned, I don't see all 4 toes. I'm only going to see like 1 or 2 toes. In this particular picture, I see 2. So after you draw the first toe, you're going to start on this toe that you just drew, and then you're going to do another parenthesis and then curve it back. You can touch it to the top of the other toe, or you can continue it on to the other side of the body, or to the other side of the paw. All right, so now that I have my toes, I'll notice that the leg is pretty parallel for the most part until it gets across from the elbow, and that it's going to make a slight bump to show where the top of the shoulder is. So I want to do almost kind of following the same curve that I did here, almost a parallel line here. So following that down until I get across from the elbow right here, and that's whenever I should be getting close to the shoulder. Once I touch the shoulder, I'm just going to darken slightly the upper part of the shoulder. Now, just so that it doesn't look like a toy cat, I'm going to erase slightly right here in between the shoulder and the neck to show you that it's not physically fused to the neck. I want a little bit of a gap, which I drew my leg a little bit farther down, so it didn't really overlap my face like I was planning, but that's okay. It just makes it look like the paw's not quite as high. If yours did overlap the face, very good job. That means that you were a little bit more accurate to the photo than me, but if you didn't, totally fine. We're just practicing it and having fun with it. All right, so now I have my face and my leg. Now I want to do my other lower leg. So something I noticed is that I have the torso right here curving down, and then my leg is just sticking out of the torso because it's being overlapped. So I'm going to keep my torso here, just like it is. And if you want to make it bump out a little bit, you can. I'm just going to keep it like this because I really like this look that I'm going for. Now, if you look at this right here, here's the shoulder. Now the shoulder on the other side of the body is a little bit lower, and then it's going to drop down, but it's pretty even right here to where it's going to be below that one. So here's my shoulder here, so I'm just going to drop below that until I get to the body, and that's where I'm going to draw just a slight diagonal line out so that I know that I'm going down for my leg. And then once I get to a slight diagonal line out, before I draw my toes, I want to draw a slight flat line to show that it's putting weight on its paw. And then I'm just going to draw a parenthesis. I only see 2 toes because he's facing away slightly. Actually, I can see a slight third one. So it just depends on what angle the paw is setting at. right, once you get your toes done, then all you have to do is just draw a slight diagonal line up until you touch the body. And now I have my other leg. And remember, we don't see the shoulder because it's on the other side of the physical body. Something that you can erase is the back of the shoulder right here. We don't really need the back of the shoulder because that is kind of, the armpit's actually like right here. So I don't really need the back of the shoulder because it's being overlapped a little bit. So here I have my leg lifted up. It's a really cute pose, and I think it'd be fun to draw, like, I don't know, something up there that it's reaching for, but you can draw anything you want to because that would be fun. All right, now I'm actually almost done already. This is a pretty simple-ish cat. All right, so I just have the back legs and the tail. So for the back leg, it's a little bit hard to see because this cat has stripes on it, but this is kind of where the back leg starts. It goes forward, and then right here we can see the change in the leg. So instead of being perfectly smooth, they actually have kind of a little bit of a slightly pointier knee, like this. So it's not a perfectly smooth line, slightly pointier line. So here I already have my thigh drawn. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to start about up here, pretty close to the top without touching though. And then I'm just going to make that parenthesis a slight bit pointier than what I had it before. And I'm going to curve down just a little bit outside of the body, not too far, otherwise it'll be lifted up a little bit. So slight diagonal line, curve it a little bit, and then bring it back down into a diagonal line, kind of like a greater than less than sign that's been kind of squished a little bit on the corner. All right, once I have gotten down to where it's a little bit past the body, then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a very flat line going out, but whenever I get to the paw part, that's where I'm going to slightly curve it for the toe, okay? So start here. You're going to do a very slightly flat line, however long you need that paw to be. And then once you get to the actual paw part, you're going to do a slight bump, and then you're going to add the toe. So here I see two toes. So after I draw that first toe, I'm going to draw another toe on the inside just by drawing that parenthesis. Notice that I left a little bit of a gap between the toe and the top of the foot. You don't have to do that, but that does leave a little bit more of the top of the foot visible. All right, after you get to this part, something very important that you do need to preserve, this right here is the back of the thigh, and then we can see the ankle bump right here. This other bump right here is the other ankle for the other foot. So this right here, we do see a slight indentation. So I'm just going to draw my foot flat until it gets past this part. And then what I'm going to do for drawing my ankle is I'm just going to draw a slight parenthesis connecting the bottom of the foot to the back of the belly area. So here I have the thigh, the foot, the ankle, and this is curving up to the belly. And then what I would do after that is I'm just going to draw that second paw. So it's going to be like a really, really small bump coming out of the thigh where I can see my two toes, because I'm seeing them from the side view, and then I see a slight bump for the outside ankle. And I'm just going to fill it in so that I know that that's the back foot so I don't get confused later. All right, so now that I have my second foot drawn, and I don't see the other thigh because of the angle that we're looking at. So usually when you draw the other leg, you should see the other thigh. But in this particular case, I don't. I just see the belly overlapping the thigh. All right, so last thing we got to do is the tail, and you don't have to do the tail in the same exact pose. So all we're doing here is just doing a frown and a smile. I'm actually going to change my pose up. I'm going to make it frown first and then smile up because I think that would give it a little bit more character. Draw your tail in any position you would like though. Very important though, remember the tail is an extension of the spine. So if this right here is my spine, as soon as I get to the back of the thigh, that's where I want to curve my tail out. So I'm going to change mine up from this picture a little bit, but you can do whatever tail you want. But all I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a big smile. And then whenever I get to wherever I want the end of the tail, I'm going to frown it just a little bit. Now, some cats have really thin tails. Other cats have really fluffy tails. If you want a fluffier tail, just make it a little bit thicker. If you want a thinner tail, just make it parallel and keep it pretty even. All right, so here I have my little tail going out. And I really like this pose because it has a nice flow with the body, although you can stick with the picture if you would like. All right, so if you have any extra lines that are bothering you or any extra lines that you don't want to keep, you can erase those as we are here. There we go. All right, so this is a very good cartoony aesthetic cat. If you're wanting it to be cartoony, I would just leave it like this, which, by the way, you don't have to draw exactly like this. If you wanted to draw bigger eyes, you can. If you want to make it a little chubbier, you can. It's entirely up to you because this is your cat. You can also draw patterns and designs on it. Lots of cats have textures and patterns and stuff. Some of them have slightly shaded areas to their bodies. Some have spots, some have stripes. So it's entirely up to you what kind of design you want to do on this cat, or you can make it a fantasy cat and cover it with like stars and stuff. I don't know. So I'm in a star mood if you can't tell. Alright, so now something that is a little different, if you are going for a little bit more of a realistic look, I would suggest adding a little bit more texture. Right now this cat's very smooth. There are some fluffy cats out there. I'm going to try to stick with the smooth cat aesthetic though. So something that you could do to make this look a little bit more realistic is, instead of keeping all your lines perfectly smooth, go back. I would suggest kind of lightly erasing it and then add just a very small texture scratch. All I'm doing is I'm just doing this over and over, but I'm making them slightly different. So it's almost like I'm drawing the points that we do for longer fur, but I'm keeping them more condensed like this. So that's a really great way to add nice texture. So I'm just going to do that to a couple parts on the fur. Not too much, otherwise it's going to look a little bit too fluffy. But it's kind of nice to always add a little bit of texture, and you can add that in some random spots throughout the body. I'm just going to add it where I think it looks a little too smooth, or where I think that there would be some muscle textures and stuff. So I'm just kind of looking at this picture, kind of observing and seeing where it looks like there would be some fur textures. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so that's looking a little bit better. And then just adding it in the parts that I think would be shaded, just a little bit more texture. All right, so that's pretty much like it. We already drew it kind of realistically in the first place, so we don't really have to do much to it to make it feel a little bit more real. You can add like slight wonks, like the ears are a little too perfect. Something that I do notice with a lot of animals is they have kind of like a fold in their ear. So something that you can do to kind of help that feel more realistic is make that ear a little bit more lumpy at the bottom by adding some indentions to it. And then you can also add some fur textures on the inside of the ear by drawing like some little repeating frowny faces and smiley faces. Alright, so I'm just going to add a couple little design choices to the cat, just to make him look cute. I've got some cats at home. I really love them. They're a little silly sometimes, but they're really cute and adorable. Alright, so there we go. All I'm going to do to finish up is just add a little bit of shading to it. Feel free to color. I would love to see what kind of designs that you add to the cat, or if you add colors and stuff. That'd be pretty cool too. So definitely have fun with this. I love cats so much. They're super cute and very random sometimes, but definitely have fun with drawing like an environment, especially with your cat. So that'd be pretty neat. All right, well, there was how to draw a cat. I hope you guys had fun, and best of luck. And thank you, those of you that shared with me your drawings. I love seeing them. That's so cool. Okay, well, have a good day. Bye.